welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and Mike Lino, wrestling's premier photographer, and Evan Ginsberg, author and movie producer. Do you want to introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. We have Brian Reznor, host at the Brian Reznor Experiment, program director at Superior Radio Network, host at House of Kayfabe, host at Franchise with Shane Douglas, etc., so on. And Michael Omansky, who is not only an associate professor, but president, not of the United States, but president at Worldwide Entertainment Marketing, Inc. Very impressive panel tonight. And Brian, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little about all your endeavors.
Well, I'm all about the podcast network, Superior Radio Network. We've been working on it for a long time. We've got House of Kayfabe, which I do with Jim Cornette's lawyer, Stephen P. New. And then we also have a cast of other folks that are a part of that show. We've got Matt Mullins. We've got Rich Quick. We've got Adam Harris, who's one of the best ring announcers around. And we've also got Stephen Barker and Derek Jones, the wrestling professor, all a part of our cast. And then also I host a show that is on hiatus right now called Franchise with Shane Douglas, with former world champion Shane Douglas. And then I piddle with the Brian Reznor Experiment as well. It's not a wrestling oriented podcast. It kind of goes all over the books. So you never know what you're going to get from that show.
There you go. And Michael Omansky goes back to the days when SD Jones would have his opponent in the corner. He would run in, the opponent would move, SD would clunk his head, and Gorilla Monsoon would sadly proclaim, SD went to the well once too often. Michael Omansky, going back decades like Dr. Mike and myself. How are you, Mike?
I actually started watching wrestling in 1961 as a kid when Buddy Rogers won the title from Pat O'Connor. And Rogers was my favorite as a kid. And I went to the Bruno Sammartino age, saw most of his title defenses in the 60s, 70s at the Garden, and it goes on. Professionally, spent the bulk of my career as an executive in the music industry. Wrestling, at my own publication, Wrestling Wonders. I was editor of Wrestling Review for Leweskin for a few years. And I've obviously followed it all my life. I have some very big friends, as you do.
Awesome. And Dr. Mike, you and Mike go back decades. Tell us about that.
I was trying to recall. I had a family emergency, but in my head, I was trying to recall which magazine and for how long I worked for Mike, and it was always an honor working with him and someone that is a territory dyed-in-the-wool guy like I am, and Mike and Evan. Did you get? Let me just ask you on the O'Connor Rogers thing, because you were like, where were you living, New York or Jersey? Were you able to? Was that broadcast even on a delay? The O'Connor Rogers match from I forget if it was it wasn't Marigold in Chicago, but it was an outdoor match. Did you get to see the card? Did they beat it back years later?
It wasn't broadcast here. I didn't see the match until I was an adult, and I met Ron Martinez in Florida and ended up putting it out on video and then DVD.
Have you watched, something I wanted to plug? Two things. I want to hold this book up. It's green screening out. Earl Maynard's new book. I think anybody that loves history, The Man Who Ruled the Universe, he's got a forward, and I know Mike will love this, of an 80s icon, an MTV icon, Eddie Grant, because Earl Maynard owns like a wonderful hotel in Barbados, and Eddie Grant is from and so he and Earl are very tight, but Earl Maynard participated. A lot of folks don't know, before Rocky Johnson came about 1980 to the Tri-WF, or was then named WWF, then Senior, Earl Maynard had already been there, and I think he was on some of the very last original Madison Square Garden shows.
I saw him at the Garden a number of times. Once with Bobo Brazil against Monsoon, and Tanaka. And actually, Maynard lost the third fall to Tanaka. And after Bobo and Monsoon split falls, a month later, Ernie Ladd, who was being pushed for a one shot against Bruno, pinned Maynard in that match. Other than that, Maynard usually won. He won at the local shows here in Jersey and New York, like White Plains, etc.
Yeah, he went through, because he was that decade after Bobo and Thomas and Ted Siki and Barry Dixon, who Earl won our Los Angeles tag titles with. That was a dream team. Then they dropped the straps to Killer Kowalski and Kenji Shibuya, Earl Maynard and Dory Dixon. But you can read all about it in his book, Earl Maynard, The Man Who Ruled the Universe. Go to Amazon. A very sweet guy that we love. And the memories, though, of the territories and guys like part of a documentary tomorrow on the Columbus Brothers, how they traded the tag straps in the mid-60s to Monsoon and Killer Kowalski. Those guys had aura. I can watch the guys of today, and a few guys that have that kind of aura, Flair or Bret Hart, but we have such a plethora of guys. Don Leo Jonathan was a god when he came into Madison Square Garden in 1974. Bruno won the title back December 10th, 73. And then he faced Nikolai Volkov, and then the guy after that was Don Jonathan, managed by the Chan Wiz. And just amazing. All of those guys had that aura. It's a different period now, I know, where it's like get your shit in, get the high spots in type thing. And it just makes me yearn for the territory days. Territory wars, Montreal, Detroit, Sheik against Victor Bruce, Atlanta, Annie Gunkel, the widow of Ray Gunkel, taking on the entire NWA, booked at the top by Cowboy Bill Watts. It was insane. Do you miss that stuff, Mike? Or do you keep following? Are you watching everything every week?
I do listen. It's funny, you mentioned Dory Dixon. Dixon was one of the last challengers for Buddy Rogers. And after Rogers lost the title to Feds, NWA, was not recognized here. He was booked in the Garden to get Dixon in a rematch, which Rogers won. It was billed as a world title match. I went to Newark, New Jersey, to the Armory, March 1963. Rogers in the Shadow against Bobo Brazil and handsome Johnny Parent. Rogers was billed as the champion. So it's fiction that Rogers was not recognized as champion. He was continuously champion here, just not with NWA belts.
Well, right. That was like when Carpentier took a second fall and then couldn't continue. And the WWA Los Angeles, the AWA, and I think the Dusek group in Omaha, Nebraska, they all recognized Carpentier as champion.
Right.
But it was in a 2 out of 3 fall match. So the Rogers thing, would he come to the ring with an actual belt, or did they just call him the world champion? Like, it was a phantom. Vince just created this title. There was no tournament, and Buddy Rogers was recognized because of whatever disputed match with Tevz.
About 2 months, he didn't win a belt. It was called World Champion. And then Billy Gilsenberg had a TV interview, who was the pledged president of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, had a belt. He said a match was held in Canada. It was not a title match. We were returning the belt to Buddy Rogers, who has been the world champion. About a week later, Gilsenberg comes back with a trophy to recognize Rogers. I don't remember the number. It's either over 100 or 200 successful title defenses. So this was in stone. He was the champion.
Let me just say this too. I don't fall asleep during AEW or any other wrestling program. I do fast forward through WWE stuff. I have to say, I watched the beginning 5 minutes of Bill Gold argue on A&E. Really is terrific, like The Undertaker's was last week. So those type of things they do a great job on. AEW is can't miss. I never fast forward to watch it from start to finish. They do Impact, MLW, etc. And even on a bunch of Hispanic channels that no longer air Lucha Libre, they had the whole Triple Mania from Tijuana with a terrific Taya Valkyrie, the virtuoso Diana Perazzo 6-person, and guys they were teamed with. Absolutely terrific. Young Bucks main event, terrific with Phoenix, and I can't think of the guy's name that's terrific.
Pentagon.
Hey, Brian, I wanted to ask a little bit.
But just I wanted to say this about Bruno told me, because I think, Mike, I used to tell you, as Evan's heard a zillion times, Bruno would call me every Sunday about 11 in the morning, nighttime California, to ask how badly Vince was doing on pay-per-views, on TV ratings. But he told me the story that after getting him banned from all the territories, from about 61 to 63, and Bruno, the only place he'd go to work was for Tunney in Toronto. And then he's main eventing, he's selling out. And he said Vince Sr. came up there, actually flew up to Toronto to beg, according to Bruno, or ask him to come back. And he would put the strap on him that Rogers was not drawing outside of MSG. He wasn't selling out the other clubs or venues. Bruno called those house shows, clubs. That Rogers was just not drawing as expected, or whatever the office was. I don't know if Monsoon had a piece of it yet, but it was like Phil Zacco and have you heard the same? Was Rogers? Does that seem true to you? I never questioned.
That it wasn't drawing. I never bought that. The time I saw him in Newark, it was packed, turn-away crowd. That's only one night. But I think the issue was Rogers' health, not that he wasn't drawing.
So, Brian, I wanted to ask you a question.
We can get to that stuff we're talking, and Brian wants to talk about current stuff. Ev, let me throw it back to you.
Buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was really interested in Brian. And we talked about working with Shane Douglas, and I wanted to find out more about what first of all, how you got started working with Shane Douglas, and then doing your podcast with.
Well, I actually knew a guy that knew Shane Douglas, and I ended up bringing him in for my birthday one year. I had a birthday party, and I decided to bring in Shane Douglas for it and just hang out with Shane Douglas for my birthday. So that's what I did, and I watched Hardcore Heaven 97 with the franchise, and it was a great experience. We become good friends. I ended up booking him when I ran a territory with Superior Championship Wrestling. He was my first champion, and he was my longest reigning champion. So we kind of created a relationship there. And when we were together, we would talk, and I'm like, man, if this was on a podcast, this would be awesome. So we started messing around with the podcast. We put out a good bit of episodes. I think there's about 50 or 60 episodes out there that you can check out. And a lot of the stuff you guys were talking about, I am a kid that grew up in the 90s when I actually started watching wrestling in 1987 as a very, very young kid that wasn't really even forming this.
I'm still waiting to grow up, by the way. I'll be 55 on Tuesday. I'm still waiting for when I'm going to grow up.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to grow up either. But a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about now, I had to go back and watch because I was too young to actually have caught some of that stuff, like the stuff that you're talking about with Bruno. My biggest Bruno experience comes from listening to Shane Douglas tell stories about Bruno, because Bruno is Shane Douglas's hero in so many different ways. And we got to talk to him about Bruno and the stories that he told. You just have to check out the episode. It's available on Spotify or any of the places where you find great podcasts. You can find Franchise with Shane Douglas. And if you check out the Bruno episode, it's really incredible. I really like diving deep into Bruno with Shane, because he's got a lot of personal stories.
Did Shane grow up there, or Philly? Or where did Shane grow up? Because he went to school at Dominic DeNucci's place.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. He grew up in Pittsburgh, and Dominic DeNucci actually came on the show as well. There's actually a Dominic DeNucci episode where Dominic DeNucci is one of our guests. It was right before he passed away. And he told some Bruno stories that would blow your mind too. Dominic is a he was an amazing interview and an amazing person. A really big influence on
friends, and they traveled around the world to South America, Puerto Rico, tours, Japan, etc.
Yeah, they sure did, and Dominic had some great stories about that time.
And Brian, tell us about the Brian Reznor experiment. What is the experiment?
Well, the Brian Reznor experiment is basically like a free speech experiment where I bring on people of all different walks of life. You know me, I'm not really. I have beliefs in all different directions. Sometimes me and you agree. Sometimes you and somebody that you don't agree with, I agree with them. I go all over the book. So I try to bring people from different walks of life together to have conversations that are not necessarily that easy to have, and try to mediate them into some type of closure, or at least an understanding between the two of them. We have a lot of different discussions, and we go all over the place. It's not always politics. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's movies. Sometimes it's comedy. Sometimes it goes in a completely different direction. So we try to keep it open to just about anything on the Brian Reznor experiment. We're experimenting. That's what we do.
There you go.
Same could be said about this show after 120 episodes. Still an experiment.
Still an experiment.
Right? So
if everybody had the same view, either politics or wrestling or MMA or boxing or whatever, it would be a boring planet. So it's good to have diverging opinions or views. Maybe I'm sure there's tons of people who would give me a hard time because I really am sick of this taking Eli Drake, L.A. Knight, and throwing him into whatever this angle is with the male models. It seems like a waste of a guy who's a tremendous wrestler, great talker.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely could not agree more. I feel like I was mad when they called him L.A. Knight. They should have just let him be Eli Drake. This guy has Rock Austin potential.
You know what I've been saying? Anytime I go on Busted Open, etc., he had that 3-syllable hand thing. Way before Britt Baker, DMD, he was doing Eli Drake. And she looked at his thing. I go, and here's a guy who roomed when they were training by Les Thatcher in was it Ohio? Him and John Moxley roomed together. And I said, man, this guy's a superstar. Why is he lowered to doing this and made to look effeminate and being like an inch away from Adam Pearce's face anytime they have these work conversations? I hate it. It's
try to explain that. Cesaro, you're shocked.
Try to explain that. Try to explain that to somebody who did not watch Eli Drake on the.
So they're wearing shitty ass clothes. They're not wearing. If you've been on a runway where there's male or females, they're wearing top of the line stuff. Probably no one would wear like $100,000 outfits. I mean, Mike Omansky, are you watching today's stuff? I'm pulling out the little remaining hair I have left watching this shit.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I think we're kind of in a wall now. WWE. It's the same guys fighting each other every week on both shows. If you're lucky, you get a fresh main event, but usually not. Look at SmackDown this Friday night. I'm sick of seeing Usos in one form or another against Street Profit. Not to disrespect their team. See the same stuff over and over.
They have tons of talent and they sit on them. Why can't you have Eli Drake do some wrestling or elevate Ciampa, for example? Ciampa was their NXT World Champion in a class athlete.
I've got something to add to that. What about eliminating half of these people's names? Why can he not be Tommaso Ciampa?
You know when that started? I think it started with Cesaro. Cesaro had a different initial first name. Andrade was something else.
Austin Theory now is Theory. Wow.
Matt Riddle is.
Do you have any theories on
Riddle.
that?
Yeah, I don't. I have no theories on that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they're doing it with the women. Like I watched her and shot for the magazines her debut match, Shotzi Blackheart, and now just Shotzi. So they're not dropping her first name, they're dropping her last name. So
and they also did it with the created girl Aaliyah. And how are you going to name anyone in history Aaliyah ever again. You shouldn't do that. That should
There's
be
a musician with that name, right? There's a
Died in a plane crash.
right?
yeah,
Mike?
extremely popular musician. Like, this musician wasn't just a musician. She's considered one of the best musicians from her genre at that time. And you're going to name a girl Aaliyah? It's just in bad taste.
That's stupid.
Mike
It's
mentioned
just crazy. Raquel, it was Raquel Gonzalez, and now why, Vince likes, and Michael Omansky and Evan can back me up on this. They bring these females in to do backstage interview stuff. They bring them in the last 3-4 months. They're gone, many of them. They always have the same letter for first and last name. So they had to take Raquel Gonzalez to Raquel Rodriguez. Why? And she has been so devalued too. She's not doing this. She was a kick-ass female giant in NXT, which is I don't fast forward to NXT. That show is more enjoyable, even in its poor state now, from the black and gold, than SmackDown and Raw.
I was going to say, I'm glad you said poor state now, because, man, that is
NXT was rocking
to get
when it's black and gold. All those great stars. I miss Johnny Gargano. Oh, man, the feud with Adam Cole and Ciampa, those three guys alone and all that great stuff. Killer Cross, Karrion Kross with the gal. That was his wife now. The best intro with all of the music and the pyro and all that stuff. It was amazing. And it just Keith Lee. How can you not just let Keith Lee be? And
how do you screw up Keith Lee? How do you screw up Rick Steiner's son?
Yeah.
Keith Lee was a loss.
They will.
I do think they've done a good job putting the machine behind Theory to date. Also,
Yeah.
we're
just bothered by the fact he lost his name.
He's obviously being pushed for the long haul, where they see him now. Do a good job. You can take a loss, come back, and push up to the next level. Once he lost the U.S. title, you for something bigger that there would be the same night. Usually, that's what they do. They strip you from one title and push you up to the next level. That's the one thing he's doing a good job at. He's got a ways to go.
But except, does anybody believe, Brian or Michael, you guys, Evan, or do any of you guys believe that Theory would have any chance with Brock or Roman?
That's here's a good point.
Size differential. It's kind of ridiculous.
You're talking about Theory, and the whole push for Theory is he is the youngest United States champion. He is the youngest Money in the Bank winner, and they are pushing toward him being the youngest world heavyweight champion. If he becomes the youngest world heavyweight champion, that means he has to win the title in the next 6 or 7 months. So do you think...
Wait, because how old was Randy Orton? They did that purposely with
22. Randy Orton was 22 years old when he won the world title.
23, because for a while they said Brock was the youngest.
By the way...
No, Brock was 25, and he was the youngest undisputed.
He was the youngest, but when he left for UFC, and I guess Vince was irritated, then they put the strap on Orton so they could call Orton the youngest.
Back in March,
despite
Lesnar beat Austin Theory at the Garden in a minute and 35 seconds. I clocked it because I knew how fast the match would be. And it's funny because they had Brock Lesnar who defended the title and a worthy opponent. Turned out Theory came out, but the fans didn't piss on the match because they knew they'd see a kill, and they were like all excited to see the kill.
Didn't on the first WrestleMania, and this brings us all back to what Evans said at the very beginning, S.D. Jones, they said, this is a record loss against Tom Bundy.
8 seconds.
5 seconds.
5 count.
That's the 5 count. That's where the 5 count maybe started. It didn't start in World of Laughs with Frizz. It started, I guess, on the first Mania.
So, Brian, since you have clearly the best sound of all of us tonight, we have some horrendous sound going. We apologize to our listeners. Brian, man, tell us about House of Kayfabe.
Well, the House of Kayfabe is kind of like a wrestling think tank where we basically try and rewrite everybody's shit. That's all we do, really. And we also critique. And we do a lot of the stuff that you preach against, Evan, where we try and critique everybody and everything about wrestling. And sometimes we can be toxic fans. We like to do that on the regular.
We never said there's a problem with that. What we don't like are the obsessiveness of people like saying that, because this doesn't happen or that doesn't happen, that they are not going to take a bath for, several weeks.
Well, we definitely bathe on time every day, guaranteed. No matter what happens on wrestling, I always make sure to bathe. So you don't ever have to worry about that with us, but we are borderline obsessive in a lot of ways. You could probably tell that by my background and all the crazy things I collect. But we are definitely obsessive wrestling fans, and we considered that we've spent so much time and money in wrestling that it's ridiculous that we're not getting a paycheck. So we started a podcast, and the rest is history. We are headed to WrestleCade this year in November in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where we will be hosting once again an amazing panel. We've got Shane Douglas and some of the stars from ECW to do a panel out at WrestleCade this year. Last year, we did the TNA panel for the early years of TNA with Jeff Jarrett. We had Goldilocks, D'Lo Brown, Johnny Swinger, James Storm, Chris Harris, and Bill Behrens. And we had an amazing panel. We just actually released that on our YouTube page at the Superior Radio Network YouTube. You can check out that panel, and we have a guest surprise from the one and only Earl Hebner. You guys got to check that panel out. It's about an hour and 19 minutes, takes place in front of a live crowd at WrestleCade from last year. We just released it on our Superior Radio Network YouTube. It is worth the watch.
Brian,
See,
really
Brian,
quick, what's Bill Behrens doing right now?
Bill Behrens is still he's still a talent manager. At the time, the reason why he was brought in is because at the time he was AJ Styles' manager. I believe that he still has, in some capacity, is still managing AJ Styles to this day. But at the time, he was really involved with AJ, and that made him really involved with TNA and the early parts of TNA. So that's why he was a great member of that panel.
For a time in TNA, when there was that Cow Palace fiasco in 2007, and Evan and I was saying it on our old show together, that Bill Behrens was the only one wise enough to demand payment upfront in full for all the TNA talent that went out there, because the Ring of Honor guys didn't make a dime. This was the thing where the husband and wife fled with the money across state lines, both the money, the cash bucks for the wrestlers and the cash bucks for the MMA athletes. And
you're getting money past Bill Behrens. Now, if you're wanting wrestlers from Bill Behrens, you were going to have to pay that man. I guarantee you that. I know that from booking through him.
Shark Boy, Steiners, Dudleys, and Abyss all got their dough. But people like Roddy Piper did not. So Bill Behrens, one of the great guys. I miss him, handling PR for TNA and all the other roles that he had. Yeah,
those folks that didn't get paid should have had Bill Behrens. That's all I can say.
Yep.
And Brian, just to say that when we talk about the obsessives we don't like, the obsessives that we don't like are the ones that never leave their basement. They never do anything. They say about how they want stuff done. But unlike yourself, you get stuff done.
No, that's perfect, because I live in Florida and we're not even allowed to have basements. So it works. It works for me. I'm not going to be in my basement because I can't have one by law, or else I'd probably be there.
So, Mike, tell us about your adventures in the music industry. Brian's a big music fan, as we all are.
Yeah, well, I started my career in consumer packaged goods, meaning companies like General Foods, Nabisco, now known as Kraft, Heinz Kraft. But through an executive recruiter, a strange point in time, Varsity Records wanted someone from outside the industry to marketing, So came as director of marketing, became VP of marketing, spent 3 decades working with major acts, managers. I marketed Dirty Dancing locally once when it first came out, 1988. Went back to the company, and 10 years later, the 10th anniversary of Dancing, I brought Elvis Presley back to life on a global profit center, and the biggest selling artist in the 1990s, early 2000s. Dealt with whole bunch of other acts. Aguilera, Dave Matthews, Backstreet Boys. I created the Jazzy Jeff Fresh Prince in the late 80s, in the era of 90 numbers. 3.5 million phone calls at $5.50 average. So had a wild time.
Wow.
Wrestling and on my own in music for about 2 years. I did the Hulk Hogan album. I represented Hulk in the music industry. I signed them to Select Records, put out that album, and on the country, Hulk and Jimmy, the major places like Best Buy back in the day, they had 10% market share of music. They had this incredible in their stores until about 2005, 2007. So that did another athlete in the marketing, John Records, Shaquille O'Neal. So I had plenty of adventures in music.
There you go. There you go. Very impressive. Very impressive. Mike,
sounds like it sounds like the Rick Rubin of or Quincy Jones or any of the absolute greats of music. Obviously a lot of crossover with wrestling. Let me ask Michael Omansky if he remembers George Winko, the wrestling Beatle in 1964, stealing the Beatles gimmick until I think somebody sued.
Yes, I remember because Wrestling Review, not when I was editor, before I was editor, had an article about it. It was a goofy article about a guy who had trouble winning a match. And I think it was either Bruno or Usher took him in tag team partner because he wanted a handicap match. The commission wouldn't allow it. He looked for the worst possible wrestler for his partner. Chose the wrestling Beatles. And you're right, that was very brief.
He didn't choose Tony Marino playing Batman when the TV series was going in 1966?
No. By the way, Marino had a good run with Rivera here as world tag team champs. As at the Garden, Marino was a surprise substitute. And Rivera beat Tanaka Narakara 2 straight falls to get the belts. And fans in those days hoped for a title change. It didn't happen. This one time, when Marino showed up as a sub, he sensed the title change, and it was ballistic in the Garden. Before the match, Reno Rivera started doing push-ups. The place went crazy, and the whole match was just wild. That was a great.
I love that atmosphere. No entrance music, no pyro, nothing. And that's the way it was with Bruno or Morales or even Backman. Just walk down the ring, or when the fans caught the first glimpse of them, they played Ballistic, whatever the venue was. I love that.
So Brian, Shane Douglas, I've spoken to him. I know he has an educational background, and that must have been quite a transition, going into pro wrestling. That's like 2 totally different worlds. How did he react to it all?
Well, from the experience that I have talking to him about that, he kind of went back and forth because there were times when he was in ECW wrestling and then going back to Pittsburgh and teaching history to 8th graders. He did that a lot. In ECW, they didn't have a solid schedule that was going to keep him completely out of the classroom. So he spent a lot of time in the classroom teaching students and disciplining students in a franchised way. You can definitely hear a lot of the stories about his teaching days on Franchise with Shane Douglas. He goes into that quite a bit, but his first love is definitely history.
Interesting.
Brian, I used to tease him because he kept threatening Heyman and other promoters. Oh, I'll just go back to medical school. My MCAT is valid, and I used to give him shit. I go, no, I'm a dentist. Your MCAT is only good for like 2 years, so you can't just go back and apply. You're gonna have to take the MCAT, and that's like a whole hell. Did he ever try to get his another MCAT and apply to some medical colleges? Because he wanted to be a doctor. He kept saying that and posting that.
He definitely wanted to be a doctor, but he never went back to actually finish that dream. He stuck with professional wrestling. I think that was more of a threat than anything else, just to get some more franchise bucks. So
he can't. And that was his.
Definitely could. He's a very intelligent man.
When he came into WWF, they saddled him with sort of a real life gimmick. Wasn't he the teacher before Matt?
Dean Douglas.
Yes, Dean Douglas. That was the big mistake, is he let the office know that he was a teacher, and that's all he had to do was let him know that he was a teacher. And the next thing you know, he's a wrestling teacher. He's a dean. He's a scholar, and
Dean Douglas.
It was a gimmick that would have worked if it would have been somebody else. Dean Douglas. It shouldn't have been Dean Douglas. It should have been a completely. I mean, Matt Stryker could have been successful with it at that time, but Shane Douglas needed to be the franchise.
But
he'd already created.
Remember him that way.
People do. That's
teaming with Ricky Steamboat in WCW. They had a great little tag team in '92.
They sure did, and they were the tag team champions at my favorite time in WCW. I think I and maybe 6 other people were watching. You may have been one of them. But there wasn't a whole lot of people watching, but the people who missed 92, 93 WCW, actually, let's go with 91, 93 WCW. They missed the best run of Lex Luger's life. They missed a great tag team with Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. They missed
Abby
and Brian Pillman. They missed the run of Big Van Vader's life. The reason why Big Van Vader is one of my favorite big men of all time is because of WCW 91 through 93. There's just so much there. Rick Rude's best United States title. Oh man,
wait a minute. Well, I'm gonna go get you. You guys will flip out. I'm gonna go get some pictures of me back in Caracas Hall with Leon. Let me mess around with this Vader gimmick, the headgear and the shoulder pads. I'm going to go get it. I'll be right back.
He's talking about the Mastodon helmet, I believe. If he got to play with the Mastodon helmet, I'm going to be really, really jealous.
Oh, my friend Brian Smith was almost given the helmet by Leon, and he turned it down. Mark Smith turned it down because he said he never wanted someone else to be known as Vader. There's only one Vader, and that's Leon White. So,
well, what a mistake that guy made. I'd have took the helmet and ran. Perfect opportunity there. He just missed.
Mark always wanted to be his own man. He wanted to be known as the Bison. He didn't want to be somebody else, version 2 of somebody else's identity.
Well, he could have done any of that stuff and still kept the helmet. I mean, yeah. It's the Mastodon helmet. I wonder if it still blew the steam or if it was already broken by then.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was a number of years ago, but he just felt like the best way to honor Leon White was to make sure that he would always be remembered as the guy with the Mastodon helmet. So that's Mark just couldn't take somebody else's identity, even if it was offered to him. He didn't want to take somebody else's identity.
By the way, buddy, I just watched Nigel McGuinness's movie finally, his documentary, and he spoke very highly of Bison Smith in that movie.
But not about Buddy Satella and the one time I managed him against Bison Smith.
No, that was not mentioned in the documentary. Yes.
What can I say? I always have hope. So, tell me a little bit about what's going on in wrestling today that has your guys' attention. Have you been talking all about Vince McMahon's transgressions and a sex date going on right now?
Well, it's not a big surprise, but based on past history, things that come out, that he is who he is. I mean, he's creative, and besides stuff, I think his team with the Turf starting in the 1980s as a franchise group, and he became who he is.
One of the things I would mention about that, it would be and this is just my opinion, and maybe you guys don't agree with my opinion or not, but I know that at first they said that Vince was paying these women off with company money. And I totally got it. Okay, I get it. You're upset with Vince. He's paying off these women with company money. But then they were reporting that he actually paid that money out of his pocket. It wasn't company money. He paid $3 million to sleep with these women. And my question is, what's the big deal if he paid the money out of his pocket? They were all consenting adults. I don't feel
Why
like
didn't he just hire hookers, as I said for the last month?
You know, he could have, but he didn't want hookers. He wanted special hookers that he paid $3 million for. And if he can do that, I'm all in support of it.
I think the issue is
Brian, the answer to your question is if somebody's salary is doubled, that isn't out of his pocket. That is company money.
Yeah.
So that's really
she was just really good at her job too.
right. Merit increase.
okay.
Maybe she's just really good, and he's like, you know what, this chick, you know, I'm paying her $3 million on the side for, you know, the backdoor action.
It boils down to the advertisers are going to demand that he be removed from there. You know, they were shopping to Disney, to NBC, Universal, Peacock. The documentary with Netflix is done. The book deal done. They were shopping his book completed to Simon and Schuster and Scribner and Sons and quite a few Macmillan, all these book houses. That's all done. I hate to say it. Nobody wants to see Vince gone, but I mean, I think he's going to be gone this year. If not,
Who says nobody wants to see Vince gone? I don't mind him being
you
gone.
can't even see this with the green screen. You can't even see
No.
Well, I see your 5 fingers, Mike.
this.
You can't see anything.
But this one is my shot backstage at pay-per-view. Pat Patterson counseling rookie Mark Henry. I couldn't find the exact photo.
Looks like a hologram.
Can you even see this? Look at this one. This one.
No, we got nothing.
It's a 4-way match where The Rock has a headlock on Chris Jericho, who's got a headlock on Steve Austin, who's got a headlock on Kurt Angle.
You have to scan those and send them to me ahead of time.
I'm not
so I can
scanning
get
for
them.
anybody unless you get paid. But see, you can see it there. That's my shot there.
We got it.
Oh, you can see it right there. Okay.
Mike Omansky, if you were producing the magazine then, I would have sent you this, or Christian and Tajiri. You can see it now the way I angle it. Or this from Karakiwan Hall, Los Brazos, who won a international tag team. These are the 2 legit brothers, Brazo de Plata, Brazo de Oro. 2 total legends, just a level behind Santo, Mascaras, Blue Demon. And then this one, the Pritchard brothers, Tom and Bruce Gordon Soley. How's that for some history?
Okay.
We
We could almost see those photos. Yeah.
Well, I think because there's the chroma key. That's my photo of Bull Ramus.
Brian's going to walk away very impressed by the production values of this show.
I don't think Mike Omansky can see, but that's my shot of Neil Masters, who won a hair versus or mask versus hair, shaving the hair with the help of Jimmy Lennon Sr. About 1969, shaving Bull Ramus's hair. Bull Ramus had the match with Bruno either at the end of the first Madison Square Garden, or I think more likely the first title offense at the new one. Madison Square
February 68. First match, New Garden. Came on lasted about 4 or 5 minutes. So it was done before curfew.
Oh, God, it was that short?
It was very short.
Bull Ramus was a quality heel, major, big, huge heel that could really move when he could move in the 60s, early 70s. For Brian, who may not have heard of Bull Ramus, he was a major global international heel, whether Mexico, Japan, or where he had a main event with Baba, with Giant Baba was a main event at Rockwood and all.
The night Bruno beat Rama was a rare pinfall loss for Ed Carpentier against Kentucky Butcher, John Quinn.
Wow.
And was the next Bruno challenger.
There's one of my favorites right there, Carpentier. He had kind of like the flair skill set, where it was predictable what Carpentier would do, but man, what aura that guy had. He was so tremendous.
Here's one of the top 10 wrestlers of my lifetime. Carpentier.
So We're running out of time. Brian, plug whatever you want to plug.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys, thank you so much for bringing me on the show. I really appreciate being on here, and I want to let everybody know we've got all types of interviews that you can find on Superior Radio Network's YouTube, or you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Podbean. We're on pretty much any platform that awesome podcasts are found on. You can find us. We've got interviews with Jim Cornette. We've got interviews with Tom Pritchard, like you mentioned just a few minutes ago. We've got a really weird Sam. Why is his name escaping me right now? Jake Roberts' brother, Sam Houston. We've got a crazy interview with Sam Houston where he talks about New Guinea pygmies that tried to eat him because they're cannibals. You should really check that one out. There's also a really great Mr. Hughes interview out, a Brian Myers interview that's out. And then, of course, the TNA panel. You do not want to miss the TNA panel because we ask the hard-hitting questions. And you know, the very last question that I ask, if you have to fast forward to the end, you can. The very last question I ask has James Storm and Jeff Jarrett both looking at Chris Harris and saying the words, "I want to know the answer to that question too." So you definitely want to check out the TNA Early Years panel. It's available on Superior Radio Network's YouTube, and I believe you will love it.
Well, I'm checking that TNA panel tomorrow.
Do it. You're going to love it, man.
And I'm glad that Sam Houston wasn't eaten by pygmy cannibals.
He almost was, though. It's a crazy story. I can't even believe he told that.
Maybe it's a head shrinker story.
And Mike, anything you want to plug?
Thank you. I appreciate you putting me on. I'm very excited to reunite with Mike Bruno after half a lifetime. That was good. And thank you, Russell, as well, for having me.
How can people get a hold of both of you guys through social media?
Well, you can find me at Superior Radio Network or at House of Kayfabe, or actually at HKFabe on Twitter, at House of Kayfabe on Instagram. You can find us Facebook.com/House of Kayfabe or /Superior Radio Network. I am Brian Reznor. You can look me up. There are at least 4 pages where you can get a hold of me on Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter. So I'm also on TikTok. So if you want to find me, you definitely can. And you can check us out on all major podcast platforms and YouTube.
How are you related to Trent, though? Trent Reznor.
I'm not. It's completely by mistake. I'm not. I wish I was related to Trent Reznor. Believe me, I'm a huge fan, but I am not related to Trent Reznor.
Of 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah, right.
For me, Facebook and LinkedIn.
Great.
Facebook and LinkedIn. Okay.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And we'd like to have you on again very soon, especially if you have something big to promote. We'd love to help you promote it.
Awesome. Thanks very much. I will be back. I'm a huge fan of Evan, and anytime Evan wants me to come on, I will be
Thank you
here.
so much. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Good night. We'll see y'all next week.
We have communication.